Hey YouTube, what is going on? Welcome to the Straight SRT YouTube channel. Today, we're discussing all things around octane ratings. Why should you care about octane ratings? What do they mean? How do they apply to you? And how do we take theory and apply it to real life, actual scenarios? Also going to get into a lot of commonly asked questions that were mentioned in my previous video. I'm discussing octane boosters. I'm going to answer those questions too and get you guys some very straight answers. That way, going forward, there's no confusion or misconceptions around octane ratings and why they matter. So a very good starting point is figuring out how much energy is there in a gallon of gas, because you can't extract more energy than already exists. So for cars, of course, we burn fuel, and the more efficient we are at burning that fuel, the more energy we can extract from the combustion and get better gas mileage, more horsepower, more torque. But we can't extract more energy than actually exists. So what's our baseline? So for a gallon of gasoline, they measure energy in British thermal units. That's a unit of measure used for energy extraction for like natural gases, for crude oil, for gasoline, etc. And so in a gallon of gasoline, there's about 115 to 125,000 BTUs per gallon of gasoline. Now that number does not change based on octane. You don't get more BTUs or more energy per gallon the higher your octane rating is. It's octane rating independent. Okay, so why do we care about octane ratings then? If octane doesn't refer to the amount of energy available, then what does it refer to? Well, a common definition, or a very generalized definition, is that it refers to the resistance of ignition as a result of compression. So talking specifically about vehicle engines, we mix air, we mix fuel, we compress it inside of our piston, we ignite it, creates an explosion, pushes the piston back out, that creates power for us. So inherent to a vehicle's functionality is this compression portion. And with higher performance cars, you want more compression. And so more compression equals a greater chance of pre-ignition or detonation. Now, even in an everyday typical car, there is still that compression factor. And so your manufacturers need to figure out how much they can compress the vehicle without requiring a higher octane fuel, because higher octane fuels are more expensive. So one of the deterrents, if you're trying to manufacture a cost-effective vehicle, is you don't want to require expensive gasoline. But why is gasoline more expensive for higher octane ratings? Because as you increase your octane rating, there's less of that available fuel out of a crude barrel of oil. So as they are extracting the gasoline out of a barrel of oil, there's more A7 octane, and there's less 100 octane fuel per gallon or per barrel of oil, of crude oil. And so in order to have a more economical car, you want to try and maximize your MPG without requiring more expensive fuel. For a high performance car, you don't care so much about the cost of fuel. You want to get the maximum amount of horsepower, maximum amount of torque out of that vehicle. So these cars use higher compression ratios, and the more economical cars use lower compression ratios. So we know that compression ratio matters, but also our timing in the engine also matters. So timing refers to when we take in air, when we spray in fuel, when we ignite it, and when we open up our valves to allow air in and exhaust out. So again, typical scenario, we have air coming in through a mass airflow sensor, our valves go down, sucks air into our piston area, and then we spray in some fuel, we compress it, and then we ignite it with a spark plug, creates an explosion, pushes back out, we open up our exhaust valve, and exhaust air goes out, rinse, wash, and repeat. But it goes on and on that way. And that timing is very critical for piston, 1 through 4 for a 4-cylinder, or 1 through 6, 1 through 8. And so it's very important to have that very fluid movement. If it's a 4-cylinder, if it's a 6-cylinder, if it's an 8-cylinder, you want to have very fluid movement across all your cylinders. As soon as you don't have that fluid movement, then you have cylinders competing with each other, and that causes inefficiencies. It causes extra stress on the engine. on your pistons, on your crankshafts. And it can cause your engine to literally explode. That's what detonation and pre-ignition is. It's when you have this explosion occurring at an inopportune time, or at a time that you don't want it to occur. And so timing makes sure that every individual cylinder in your engine is all working together to maximize, again, efficiency. So we know that the available energy per gallon of gasoline isn't going to change based on octane rating. But we do know that we can increase our efficiency based on octane rating. Again, as you have a higher compression ratio, you can have a more efficient exchange of energy from gasoline to your engine to extract that to create more horsepower, more torque, more MPG. And so while there isn't a difference in energy, there is a difference in the ability to extract power based on octane rating. And that is inherent to vehicles based on their higher compressions. So how does that apply to a real world, real life scenario? What's that actually mean? So I have a handful of questions here I'm going to discuss. So one question being, my car requires 87 octane. Should I increase my octane? And the answer is, it depends. If your car behaves normally, if it functions the way it did when it was brand new, if you got your smooth idle, good throttle response, it's all behaving typical, then there is no benefit to increasing your octane. If, however, you get a check engine light and it says you have knock occurring, which is detonation, which is pre-ignition, it's called knock. If your engine's knocking, if you're experiencing a rough idle, where your RPMs are constantly jittering, if you're experiencing very sluggish acceleration, those can indicate needing higher octane. You can go ahead and try and use, instead of 87, try 91 octane. If it gets better, you know your problem is your pre-ignition. Your problem is your knocking. So that will resolve that issue. Now, since your car was designed to run at 87, running at a 91, 93 will fix it temporarily, but you probably have an underlying issue you want to actually get addressed. If your car runs fine on 87, putting in 91, 93, 100 octane isn't going to do anything. What our cars don't do, they don't test the octane rating. They don't say, today I'm going to try and change my timing and try and figure out, did Johnny put in higher octane fuel? The car doesn't do that. It's going to assume you put in what you're supposed to put in. If you go the other way, if your car's rated for 91 octane, 93 octane, you put in 87, it's going to know. It's going to hear that knocking and know that something's going wrong. And it's going to retard your timing. It's going to change it so that your engine is under less compression, under less stress, under less potential for that knocking to occur. And again, you really don't want to do that. Actually, you never want to do that. You always want to use the recommended octane rating for your fuel. All right. So why do higher performance cars from the factory require higher octane? This gets into, again, the higher compression ratio. Higher compression ratio, more efficient, but has that ability or the possibility for ignition, detonation, pre-ignition, knocking, etc. And so those cars are specifically designed to run at a higher octane in order to meet those demands for horsepower, torque, etc. Let's see. If my car gets tuned, do I need higher octane? So, in any case I can think of, when we go to a tuner, we're trying to get more out of our car. We're trying to get more horsepower, more torque, faster speed, whatever it may be. And so typically, when we go to a tuner, unless we have bolt-ons or we have some engine modifications, they tend to change timing. If you change your timing, it's going to require typically higher octane fuel. But always ask your tuner, hey, what did you change in my ECU in order to get me whatever the outcome was? And it's usually timing, which usually requires higher octane fuel. For SRTs in particular, through Diablo, they offer a Diablo tune, which is a 93 octane tune. That tune requires 93 octane. From the factory, our SRTs require 91, but they change timing and other things to get us higher octane ratings, or to get us higher power, which requires a higher octane fuel. So does more octane, or does higher octane rating in turn make your car run richer? The short answer is no. So when you have one pulse of your injector, whether that pulse is a pulse of 87 octane or a pulse of 1,000,000 octane, the energy contained there, as we discussed previously, is the same. You don't get more fuel per pulse because you have a higher octane. It's the same quantity of fuel. So you're not changing your air-to-fuel ratio. It's going to be exactly the same. This question goes a little bit deeper, though, because your lower octane ratings tend to burn a lot faster. So you light it and boom, it's done. Your higher octane ratings burn a little bit slower. So it's like, and so when you're measuring that, there can be some leftover fuel there because of a higher octane rating. That's very specific, but gas is a 1-to-1 ratio. You don't get more gas with a higher octane rating. Does higher octane clean the engine better? This is kind of a trick question because, as we discussed, when you have higher octane, usually it's because your car requires it, which has higher compression. Higher compression has more heat potential in your engine, which means things burn a lot hotter. Because they burn hotter, they tend to burn off more crud, more sludge, more carbon burn up or build up, and so they tend to be cleaner. So inherently, yes, but specifically, no. And then does fuel differ from manufacturer to manufacturer? The answer is definitely yes. Different manufacturers use different additive packages, different detergents to clean engines. So going from like Sunoco to Mobil to Beyond Petroleum, they all have different additives they add to their fuel. And they each claim that it makes your engine run more efficient, cleaner, better, whatever it may be. So it does vary. Now, some manufacturers or some gas stations, they don't buy fuel from one supplier. They buy it from whoever's cheapest at that point in time. And so you go to the same pump and you're going to get different fuel day to day depending on who they're buying it from. If you go to ExxonMobil, you're only getting ExxonMobil fuel. If you go to BP, you only get BP fuel. But if you go to one of those generic gas stations, then it's not consistent day to day. So if it turns out that you know that your car, for whatever reason, runs better on BP or runs better on Mobil, or you really like Sunoco, then stick to it. That's just it shouldn't matter that much, but regardless. All right, so those are all the questions I had. Those are the most common questions asked in the previous iteration, and the most common questions asked, at least as far as I can tell, throughout YouTube and throughout the internet. So hopefully I clarified what octane ratings are. We talked about energy extraction, talked about compression ratios and why they matter, talked about adverse effects of detonation, knocking pre-ignition, talked about timing. So hopefully that clarifies a wide array of issues and comments. If not, as always, drop comments below. Let's get conversation started, provide extra clarification if needed. More than happy to do so.